Hey everyone, it's Andrew. Welcome to Atomo Wednesday, February 22, 2023. We're going to jump into some interesting stuff from China. So what I have here is there's a document from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China, the U.S. hegemony and its perils. And this is quite recent. So they're talking in this article. Um, so this isn't to shill about anything or to pat on the back to the Chinese or the Russians or whoever, not even the Americans or the laughable Canadian government. They all do their things, and that's just again looking at, well, what are the little people going to face here? But there are some salient points that are being brought up here in this document, and it follows. Here's the five sections. They talk about the political hegemony of the USA, throwing its weight around. I like the language that they use in the document is doesn't have the air of crisp formality. It has a bit of this. You see the wanton use of force, looting and exploitation, monopoly and suppression, spreading false narratives. Um, yeah, so, and they conclude it out. Now they go in to talk about how here they're picking on the rules-based international order, basically the USA getting into a position where, we make the rules, and if it's not convenient for us, we will change the rules as needed. And well, let's get into this. Uh, okay, so now they talk about the concept of the Monroe document, and um, kind of the idea here is, if I were to put it simply, it's just USA number one, and anybody else who might come to a level of ascension might be pressed down. So if we look at Germany, for example, um, I think Germany is a bit of their own problem. It's in Germany is an interesting one. I'm going to take a bit of a tangent here because we saw what happened with the Nord Stream pipeline. I talked in previous videos using the Zoltan Pozar from Credit Suisse. He's an analyst where he says, "Hey, there's 20 billion euros of gas inputs coming in per year. That was leveraging 2 trillion euros worth of productive economic benefit, especially for Germany with all their industries converting that energy into goods to which they can then export and basically carry the euro. And now all of a sudden it's gone. And it's now being set up. It looks like the USA is to blame from that. And you can see the Hirsch article that went out lining up, his thoughts on how the Nord Stream actions occurred. Again, there's unless somebody takes him to task and has him pull the evidence. So that's that. That's going to be a whole separate video. But we're looking at, so some of they in the article, if you look at this, they really point to where some of the allies within the Chinese sphere of influence have been sullied. So there's some very nuanced things that are happening in this article. We talk about Cuba, and Cuba was a socialist government. So you'll see the socialist style powers that, and when I talk about the Go board for geopolitical game board, that these are potential allies or ideological adjacent countries that are would be, I guess, friendly to the Chinese way. They talk about the color revolutions. We know the Maidan revolution in Ukraine had a lot of George Soros playing with that one, and they tried it as well. They did Rose Revolution in Georgia, the Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan. So, if we don't like this government, we're going to try and regime change it, and they can do that by putting in the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, a lot of these charity organizations that can get into these countries, start operating, and uh, enact. They can do some belligerence from within the country. So we got the unconventional force being used there in terms of spycraft and statecraft, without firing shots. But usually in these revolutions, there are instigating flashpoints that happen that are set up in order to create a rolling cascade of problems. And unless places like Kyrgyzstan, I think there's also Kazakhstan had some of it as well that was in play, and they managed to parry it. Even in Turkey, there was an attempt on Erdogan's life as well a while back. The Philippines ousting of President Ferdinand Marcos and Estrada in 2001. Hey, we don't like these ones. They're not really playing ball with the USA. Interesting about Marcos, I'll do another tangent here, is I've spent time in the Philippines and worked with people in the Philippines. A lot of them, as much as you remember Imelda Marco and the shoes, 3,000 pairs of shoes and spending all this money, and oh, they were corrupt, and it was in the news all over the place. Um, I very much remember this because it was talked about and talked about and talked about on radio constantly, where I was growing up in Canada. And it's always talking about the shoes. But when I went to the Philippines, I said, well, here it's kind of a Robin Hood story. It's, well, yeah, they robbing from the rich, but giving a lot to the poor. And it's like, oh, once I realized that, that's why they went so hard on trying to get rid of this person, is because you're taking from the haves and giving to the have-nots. And, it seems like in the USA, that's a no-no thing to do. It should be taken from the have-nots to keep building that pyramid of wealth of the haves. And well, how did that manifest? Well, in the Philippines, a lot of people got an English education completely paid for. It was brought into the school system, and Marcos brought that in. So that's one example. And when I was hiring these people to work in a call center, a lot of them spoke very, very good English, very good English. And they said, yeah, this is the person that we have to thank for it. Ferdinand Marcos. Okay. So, I have to call out where credit's due. We got the Venezuela. I don't know much about that. A lot of the double standards. So, do talk about using the basically a lot of these United Nations um, human right councils to, and there's again, that's another way that these globalists can start to enforce their rules based uh, concepts, is through things like the United Nations. Let's look through this a bit more on other things that are popping up for me. Wanton use of force. Yeah, okay, we all know about this. Let's just look them just listed off. Korean War, Vietnam War, Gulf War, Kosovo War, War in Afghanistan, Iraq War, Libyan War, Syrian war, yeah, Libyan war. And you remember when they're saying that didn't go through. So when the USA has military action, this is where it gets really weird. There should be should go through Congress, and Congress authorizes the use of force. But the Libyan war, well, it wasn't really a war; it was a kinetic action. And interesting, there they go, changing the rules again. Making up. You're finding this a lot and lot more, especially after the Rona went through. That you see all these organizations making up new rules. Well, new rules for what a recession is, new rules for what a vaccine is. Oh, excuse me. Um, yeah, military budget going phenomenal budget, 800 overseas military bases. Yeah, there's just a lot of like this system is going to collapse. There's no way you got $700 billion and you're not getting productive capacity out of that in tune of 700 billion. That's basically a big cost center. You think about it as an organization. Um, yeah, Jimmy Carter, I believe he was in the hospital. I haven't checked to see if he passed away. Just now that I'm thinking about it, saw that there's a note that he was in the hospital. Um, Most warlike nation in the world, according to a Tufts University report. Well, and if you just list out all of the interventions that the USA has done in these countries that have been posted, then yeah, low intensity and drone wars. And we know all about those, especially during the Obama era, where those drones were out smacking a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, it's in here. Well, you hear a lot of the quotes about the Iraq War, and remember Colin Powell holding up the little vial saying, Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al Qaeda, and that's was the cause of our 9/11. Well, here you got 900,000 lives, this many of them civilians, millions injured, tens of millions of people displaced through Iraq, places left in a very precarious security situation. Go into Afghanistan as well. They have the Kabul debacle. Um, and they pulled out, and they left all the military equipment in Afghanistan. Yeah, so jumping forward, the Bretton Woods system basically setting up the way for the United States to uh, make the dollar the reserve currency, and then they beggar their reserve currency position. So in here they're talking about costs only about 17 cents to produce $100 bill, but other countries had the pony up. Here's the language again: pony up, pony up. $100 of actual goods in order to obtain one. So just the amount of arbitrage on that, uh, your ability to basically put all this paper out there, uh, and other countries have to trade at basically a higher exchange when we convert it into those dollars. And then here we go. Now they're talking about the injection of trillions of dollars into the global market. That means all these other countries that are importing US money will get a big kick up in their inflation. So I like this. Exactly what Nixon's Secretary of Treasury John Connolly once remarked with self-satisfaction, yet sharp precision. The dollar is our currency, but it's your problem. And when you have most of the world's financial institutions linked up through that, then there's not much they can do to kind of break out of that dollar Like back in that time, it's what Russia do something? Well, Russia in 1991 was a basket case. China was still it hasn't 1990s. China hasn't even blipped onto the map as far as economic output, though that changed. And what they're not getting into here is that America, USA basically shot their own foot through the World Trade Organization and the movement of all significant amount of industrial production over to China. And American CEOs just made the bucks off of the arbitrage or of being able to lower nominal wages by offshoring a lot of manufacturing. And that's why you saw a lot with President Trump trying to get a lot of that manufacturing back into the United States, so creating conditions for the reversal of that. Well, yeah, the USA wants to run a service economy running at a massive deficit. That's just not going to be sustained unless they're going back to maybe more of a mercantilist function of making stuff and finding ways to sell that stuff to the rest of the world. Let's jump to the technological hegemony. A lot of trying to build intellectual property rules that basically kind of lock countries into not being able to develop their own methods. And of course, well, you want to play properly so that you're not going to lose the access to these technologies. The other thing to consider is as you got if you're making chips and you're licensed to do that and you're using the technology, but all the fab plants are not on U.S. soil, and those governments are playing ball because you want the fab plants there. You get the benefit of having that technology there, and while the fab plants are there, basically they're reverse engineering this technology to replicate it at some point in time. So it's a matter of just continuing on. But as these industries move from the USA over to China, then they can copy these technologies. Now, what we might see, I think it's already happening, is countries will not, Russia has said this, will no longer honor the intellectual property rights. So now, they get a chance to, whatever industries have opened up in Russia, now, there's will reverse engineer the products and sell it for a fraction of the cost. And what's to stop other countries to say, well, I can buy the widget for $100 here, or you sell it for $1.50. Okay, so they might, and if the widget's of the same quality, great. Um, Clamp down on China's high-tech enterprises, suppress China's social media apps such as TikTok and WeChat. Well, and we know a lot about, especially about TikTok and the way that it's set up. It's the way that China has set up TikTok. And if I, if we, the information and data that's being sent aside is TikTok in China will show educational videos. They won't just show, hey, look, I had my top surgery. Look at me. Woo, I'm liberated. It will show like engineering stuff, sciencey stuff at intervals through the feed. But what USA gets is they get this basically this it's culture ripping and tearing sort of videos that are just going to the foundations and bedrock of the American system built on the British common law system. And what primarily means is the inalienable rights of the individual that are made sovereign, not the state, but the individual is made sovereign. That's the biggest thing that the West has given. If we can take that and put a wedge in it and start driving that apart. Well, how do we do that? Well, first, let's break down family structure as best we can, and let's break down societal structures as best we can by taking people and moving them to divergent poles. So if we were to like really push harder on um, progressive policies to the point where at what point are we going to have furry bathrooms where any cat adjacent, feline adjacent person can go in and use a litter box in the bathroom? At what point do we get to that? And we saw the teacher out in Ontario, Canada, with the cup Z prosthetic breasts as kind of trolling things that were going on in the school. So we get that level of at what point are people just going to reconstruct themselves into the minority, or if you got so many intersections and adjacencies that what everybody's going to be suppressed and repressed and have a claim on just the poor single worker that's doing something productive and of all these parasites just trying to take from that worker. Just yeah, so that's basically I don't have too much love for China on that. uh, even the United States, for example, we all know social media is on their path. um, Anyhow, yeah. Yeah, chips are a big thing. It's almost like oil these days. And then there's the 5G products. I think there's even talks about Canada. United States notorious as an empire of hackers. Yeah, and this is the one thing is they'll call that other countries are hacking, but there's so many attack vectors that come out of the USA. I'm pretty sure some of those get bounced right back uh, into. There's even allegedly uh, people who build operating systems could allegedly make viruses for it and then sell you the cure. Uh, so there's that as well. So that's a type of bullying behavior. Um, They're going into U.S. surveillance is indiscriminate. Oh yeah, we know a lot with Edward Snowden, and they do mention Prism. That was a big one that Edward Snowden brought out. Uh, Julian Assange brought out, the cables that came through Chelsea Manning. Uh, Continuing on here, cultural hegemony, spreading false narratives. Oh my goodness, yes. Um, but it's a lot of soft culture work. So through toys, through movies, through Hollywood, there's a lot of the soft culture that gets moved around the world. And they can't really consider, like, especially back in the day, it might have been a little. I think there's always a level of progressiveness in Hollywood that's ahead of where people are, and that makes it kind of ha ha funny until it gets to a point where it's just complete wokery and it's just gone to the point where it's not edgy or funny in the way that it might be. It's like just gone risque. But I saw that as I was growing up, where okay, it's getting more violent, language is getting more offensive, and it's almost like, well, how do we up that? Well, next thing you know, you got military members dressing in dog fetish, going at it doggy style, and heck, well, put it on late night TV and watch them go at it. At what point does it totally degenerate? So you're going to start to see some, and Putin already talked about that in his sort of State of the Union address, kind of mocking, how bad that traditional American values have just been decaying at an alarming rate. But that gets now pumped over into China and other countries, and they just have to put up, they have to put firewalls up for that sort of stuff. Um, okay, some other things that, mm, yeah, and then they talk about putting, yeah, yeah, okay. So what I was getting at with is bombard socialist countries in dozens of languages with inflammatory propaganda day and night. Yeah, and so you saw that's why I made the thing about TikTok. See China playing that game as well. Kind of, hey, well, if you're going to start ripping apart your fabric, well, hey, how about we just help you along? I would play the same game if I got an opponent on the other side of the board and they're making mistakes, and there's a way for me to maximize the amount of mistakes that they can make. There you go. Yeah. The United States uses misinformation as a spear to attack other countries. Well, look at it this way. They're even using it, US government's even using misinformation on itself. Uh, it's using not using facts anymore. It's not using science. The science, yeah, capital T, capital S, science. You just turn and run when you start seeing that. Even in U.S. schools, colleges, it's like, okay, do you dare go against a professor and say something different or talk taboo subjects now in universities? Universities, places of higher learning and debating these ideas. Now there's certain ideas that you just can't talk about. It's taboo, you know. So you just need it's hey, China, hey, Russia. All you need to do is just follow science, do true science, do true research. You'll catch up and overtake the USA at this rate. I hate to say that as a Canadian. It's just the amount of ridiculousness. Like, we won't be able to tell our head from our ass soon. We can't even figure out what a woman is. So yeah, there's that, and there's my ranting on this as well. The United States has been overriding truth with its power and trampling justice to serve its self-interest. Well, you know what, China? All you have to do is if you just keep waiting, then United States, well, I think the other part that they worry about is the United States turning into a wounded animal. It's its own self wound. It's chewing its own paws off right now, and that's a dangerous creature to have. With when it show the amount of military bases and other stuff, you know, nuclear weapons as well that are in inventory. So, well, hey, good on China to throw an article like that out. But what we have to look at this is it's their way of wagging a finger at the USA, and that finger wag can raise into other stuff. Uh, Chinese are slow. They're not in a bad way. How about patient is a better word? Old culture. I don't completely agree with everything that they're doing, of course. Uh, what we're looking at, okay, so how can we take the West and have it not disintegrate into a bowl full of vicacious jelly that can basically toxicify anything that it touches. So that's the worry. And the best thing that we can do is just do what you can within your more local levels to improve the way that maybe your schools are run, or you got sports clubs, or you just have people going for a walk and just, talking about problems, not putting your head in the sand. Just doing that little bit within your zone of control to help make things just a little bit better and not dig the hole any deeper than it needs to be dug. Uh, so to leave you with that, that is the miracle that will happen, but we have to keep working at that. Thank you for your time and attention as usual.